Ken, to kick us off, this is something that's very much in the news relative today, this matter of pronouns, where individuals choose how they wish to be addressed. This is often framed in the context we hear of this DEI, this diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly in workplaces, but can also be seen in friends and family members. So how should we approach this from a biblical perspective? And should we use people's preferred pronouns as an expression of our love to them? How do we apply God's truth, effectively navigating these things?
I think this falls into that second category of approval. And in my opinion, I believe that you will indeed be approving of what we'll call the transgender agenda if you agree to use someone's preferred pronouns that don't correspond with who they truly are. Remember, the prevailing principle is, as you quoted Ephesians 4:15, speaking the truth in love. And the truth in this context is that pronouns, even though they are based in language, language is based in reality. And pronouns are based on the common sense reality recognition that a person's actual identity is either male or female. And it has been that way for millennia. All languages have this. And so in order for me to bend that because somebody wants me to acknowledge something that is untrue, I would in fact be approving of their desire. And I think that would in fact be wrong. So I think what you've got to do is you've got to anticipate and you got to be strategic. You've got to be aware, especially in a work situation where your job could be at stake or you could be overtly offensive to a client or something like that. In that situation, I think you need to go the extra step in attempting to avoid using pronouns at all about that person. Don't refer to that person with him or her, his or him or whatever it is. Just refer to that person by their name in a discussion. Refer to them, of course, by any name that they would prefer to be called, because a name is going to be just simply what they want to be called. That might be offensive, but really that's not the point that we're talking about. You got to be careful. If you slip up, you can just try to avoid it. Maybe don't say anything about it. Don't draw attention to it. Then if somebody comes to you and says, you misgendered me, or you misgendered your coworker, or whatever, then that's when you're going to have to step it up to the next level and perhaps have a discussion with them about that is not something that I can agree to do. And, it's going to be a matter of conscience in many cases, but in this case, I think it's not. I think this is a matter of truth or untruth, and we cannot embrace an untruth. Be civil, be kind, but you need to stay with the truth.
So would you ever preemptively go to them if you know somebody, let's say right now, Christians in that situation, they hear this and go, that sounds right. Would you say before it comes up, go to them and go, hey, I know you prefer this. I'm a follower of Christ. I feel like this is lying because it's not true. And then have that engagement before it comes up, or you slip and say something that's not preferred?
I think that sounds good.
Yeah.
And that sounds like it would be a really nice tactic. But I think, and I've had circumstances very similar, when you're that proactive, you end up getting yourself in trouble.
Okay.
And I think what I'm saying, it's best to avoid those troublesome situations by thinking about how you're saying, what you're saying, thinking about what you're saying and how you say it around your coworkers. And especially if you're talking about pronouns, it's how you're referring to somebody else. Yeah. And in this case, what you're really more worried about is not offending the person who wants to be named by the different pronoun, but it's offending that person who is going to take up an offense for them, right? That's the one you have to be careful about. And so if I'm going to refer to another person when I'm speaking to Larry, I would say, now, when I speak to Pat, when I speak to Dan, when I speak to Mary or whomever, and just try to use their name instead of pronouns in those cases where you know that might be an issue. And that requires you being informed.
And don't you think that and I agree with everything you said, but I think a more common scenario is where you are asked for your pronouns. In other words, I think it is wrong to state your pronouns when asked, even if you're using the right pronouns, because the whole impetus behind asking you that is the idea that the pronouns are flexible, right?
If you're not compelled to do that by company policy, I think it is a tacit admission. It would be approval that gender is fluid and can be changed to suit one's current state of mind rather than a fixed state determined by the creator. And therefore, you should not, as a matter of principle, participate in that cultural trend. I have colleagues that I'm working with that they do that. They put their pronouns on their LinkedIn profile. They put their pronouns on their email signature. I'm not going to do that. I'm not falling into that. If somebody then compels me to do so, I will have
it's time to push back a little bit.
I would push back on that and say that I am not comfortable doing that. I don't believe that that is necessary. And if it's something where I'm going to have to take a stand, I'm likely going to have to take a stand.
Even if it's your employer that's requiring you to do that.
Certainly.
Well, they're essentially compelling you to participate in a lie.
They're asking you to be an
Correct.
advocate.
Yeah.
So you're moving from mere approval to advocacy at that point. So for example, if somebody has to have it on their email, if it's a company-wide policy, identify your pronouns, now all of a sudden it's more than anything, it's advocate. You're creating the false understanding that there are possible sexualities.
I would say it depends on what they're trying to do with the pronoun. Let's say, for example, my name is Pat. Okay.
Understood.
Yes.
And it could be one way, it could be the other. We just don't know.
There can only be one.
It could only be one Pat.
Yeah.
This Pat. But no, seriously, if my name is
The name Pat is gender neutral.
is gender neutral, Chris, Pat, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I would ask them, are you asking me to put my pronouns on there because you believe that gender is fluid, or you want people to make sure they know that if they are referring to me and they don't know me, that they know I'm male? In which case I would ask them, can I simply put male on there instead of his, her, him?
Okay.
I would indicate that I'm a male. I'm a Pat. I'm a male, right? That type of thing. And if you do it in a respectful way, then you're more likely to get accommodation from an HR department, because they're ultimately not about usually this is it's not
Always the case.
not always the case, but HR departments are typically just trying to keep peace and harmony in a workplace situation.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, companies, I don't know if it's still as much now as it was in previous years, but companies are seeking to get high scores from like the Human Rights Campaign and people like that. Right. And one of the ways you get high scores is everybody sharing their pronouns in the emails and all that kind of thing, you know.
But it's important that Christians understand that we do want to speak the truth in love. This is not just a preference thing.
It's not. No,
it's not.
It's a lie.
If you participate in this, and I refer to Dan as a she because that's what he wants, I am participating in lying, and I am lying, and I am sinning. We've got to be clear on that.
I think so.
Now, I don't need to be a jerk about it, but it flies in the face of the God who created him. He's a male, and that's what it is. And it's a lie, and we just can't do that.
Because if we take the idea of, let's say somebody asked you to embezzle, you would say no. And they say, well, no, it's fine. The company's very generous, and they would understand, and they're accommodating. It's happened before.
Yep.
You would say, it's wrong. It doesn't matter what the position is. It's an issue of right from wrong, truth from error, unrighteousness and righteousness.
That's
so
right.
I won't participate.
And I think the principle, the biblical principle for how you approach it can be found in characters such as Daniel in the Bible and Esther. In the case of Daniel, having to go to the authorities and say, please let us, he did it with great deference and respect. Please let us eat this particular food and not the king's table. Feed us just vegetables. For Esther, she went to the king and she was very respectful and did a very dangerous thing, but took the risk, doing it in a respectful way, and was rewarded. And God blessed her efforts.
Well, you can juxtapose that with both of those scenarios with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who said, "Please don't make us worship the idol," and they got thrown into the furnace. So it's not always going to go well for you.
That's a very good point, Larry. And sometimes you're going to have to face the furnace.
Yeah. Let me take it kind of in a different direction, but somewhat similar. A man. I'm not picking you, but you've known him all your life for Ken, and you see him after a period of time and he comes and says, "Hi, my name is Kendra." How would you respond? How would you
So this
react?
is at work, or is this just in life?
Just in life.
An
Someone
interpersonal
quote,
Now it's not
transitions.
pronouns, it's
Now
just my preferred name.
Right. And Kendra now doesn't look like a Ken.
Correct.
Has gone through whatever gyrations there are physically, chemically, whatever. How do we handle those situations? Do we call them by their name from a feminine standpoint, if they now are identifying as a female?
If a person wants to be called a certain name, I know I went from Kenny to Kenneth to Ken, and those are the names that I prefer to be called. Obviously, it wasn't call me Kendra. I wasn't saying call me of a different gender. But I think that is a place where if a person wants to be called a certain name, I'm going to accommodate that person instead of just being provocative in that case. I would rather establish a relationship with that person, because it's not a situation where I'm going to lose my job or I'm going to set a wrong precedent by accepting that a person can become a different gender. I'm simply calling a person by a different name. And this, yes, it's uncomfortable, but this would be an opportunity for me to try to establish a relationship with that person and then speak of greater things. This is a
I
small
agree
hill
with you,
to die on.
but here's why. Because while names have some cultural definitions to them, they don't have a correspondent view to reality. They don't.
Not in our culture.
Anywhere. Pat could be a Ken, which is a non-challenging, could be a female name in another culture. It does not imply maleness. He implies maleness. So there's no deviating from that.
Correct.
So
There's only
therefore, I know
one
you and I
context.
disagree on this,
Yeah.
but I would also
Somewhat,
probably accommodate that person. Because
it's just a
But is
matter of
that-
being
is that
polite.
love?
Well, and I think it depends on the circumstances.
I do too.
At work, you may not even know what the person's name was before they transition, so you have nothing to fall back on.
Right.
Well, he
But-
said that I knew
But
the
if
guy
you know the
before.
person, or especially particularly, perhaps it's your son or your daughter.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're well within your rights to say, "I'm going to call you what I named you."
That's
Agreed.
right.
Yeah,
You know,
agreed.
I
and
mean,
that's a
you know.
different scenario than
Yeah.
that person
Sure.
that you
Yeah.
know
Sure.
casually at work.
And it could be even you might even take that approach with a lifelong friend. Say, I love you enough to not help you participate in this lie.
Yeah, I think
You
the
know.
really important thing is because you'd said it's sin if you misrepresent truth, reality.
yes,
Correct. So that's why this is a very important nuance. Most people don't realize this. Grace Fellowship, we have Taste of Grace afterwards. There was an individual who has taken on a feminine personality, wears dresses, et cetera, they're a friend of somebody in our church.
They're male. Aren't you?
Male,
Okay.
biologically male, is going to come to the church. They came to the church, came to Taste of Grace as a male, as their biological sex, asked some of these questions, and I represented it similar to this, but I said it's not a matter of right and wrong in that moment. It's a matter of trying to help you understand in your confusion that you are a male and it's sinful to represent it any other way. So we talked about that, but I didn't go after them by going, "Hey, I understand you wear dresses." Right. I didn't do that because the goal was not to offend them, but to help them understand. Now, if after our conversation they demand that I say that, or our relationship is contingent on me saying that and accepting that, then there's a separation.
And you went out of your way not to be deliberately provocative.
I don't want to be a jerk.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be a jerk because Jesus wasn't a jerk.
Right.
He hung out with adulterers and tax collectors, sinners, and the religious leaders had the understanding of righteous people don't hang out with unrighteous. Well, because they had a particular brand of righteous. So if a Christian's thinking that, I can't engage with people, or I've got to hold them to account, I can't let them talk, or somehow I'm allowing them to continue in their sin, I would challenge that. Just because the life of Christ is, I think, is a great leveler in that.
Yep.
Good. Okay. Great. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to the next one. This one is for you, Pat.